Hi everyone. In today's video we will write some tests for our application. And we could have done it much earlier. Some people even suggest to start your development by writing tests, and then it's called test-driven development. However, you definitely should write some tests for your application, because we'll be perhaps in the future adding some additional features to our application, and we want to be able to test that our application still works. And perhaps currently our application is very simple, right? So it has just, to be specific, 4 endpoints that we can very easily test manually. However, when the application grows, it will not be as simple. It will not be as simple anymore to test it. Therefore, you should write automatized tests. You can call them unit tests. You can call them integrations tests. This really doesn't matter. What's important is that you have a piece of code that you can run, and it quickly checks all the things that your application should do. So it checks if it still does them in the same way. Okay, so to start, I think what we first should do is we should do a little reorganization here. So let's create a new folder, which will be also called app. Now to this folder, we'll move our application logic. So these things will move up here. Now, I think what we now need to do is we need to change the paths here a little bit. So first off, we need to add, because we'll no longer have the views folder inside the main folder for applications, so where the package log and package.json files are. So that we need to specify here an alternative path. Okay, so let's do this. Let's say app.set, and then we want to set the path for the views, and the path will be, and I will use the path .join here, and we will join the directory name with /views, right? Because it will take the current directory of the file, and then it will be here inside the views folder. Here is where our index.ejs is. Okay, and I think also it makes sense, maybe we can put that up here a little bit. Let's just stay consistent, and let's also use the same way here with the public folder. Okay, let's close the parentheses, and we need to import the path. So there's const path and require path. You don't have to install it. Okay, that's good. Let's test maybe now if our application still works. So here we just say npm run start, and our application doesn't work because I think here in the package.json file, exactly here we need to, because we have added an app folder, so let's also add it here, and let's try to run it once again. And this time we get an error because we need to go into the app folder, of course, because we are not even in our application directory. Okay, so let's now open our application. Let's see if it works still. Okay, so it seems that it does work indeed. Okay, that's fine. And this point now, the checking if it works, as you can see by now, it's super simple. We can do it very quick. However, it would not be as simple if our application had more features on it. Therefore, today we'll work on exactly that. We'll work on exactly developing a mechanism that checks quickly and automatically if our application works correctly. Okay, let's continue with the code now. What we now need to do is, here we have created the app folder. Let's, inside the first app folder, create another folder. Let's call it test. So in general, the logic I'm trying to achieve is that now in the test folder, we will have a test file for every JavaScript file that we have in the main app folder. Therefore, here in the app folder, we have the app.js file, and here we will create a file called also app.js. However, here we'll have the tests. So here the file will have tests for the app.js folder. And actually in the app.js folder, currently we have all the logic for application. So let's start with the app.js folder. What we have to do first is we need to install some dependencies that we'll use. So from the dependencies, we will use some npmi on npm install something called Mocha, and Mocha is a package that will allow us to print the tests nicely. So it will give us an access to the functions called describe and then it or it. And this will allow us to print nicely the output of the tests and to actually run the tests. So what Mocha will do is it will look for the test folder and then it will run all the files that are inside the tests folder. Okay, that's good. What we still need to do while this is being installed, let's wait for it to finish. Okay, this is finished. We also need to install something called chai, and chai will be the package we will use to make assertions, meaning it will be what we use to set an expectation, to set our test result. This is installed, good, and let's also install something called chai HTTP. So chai HTTP will allow us to test a web application using chai. This is installed. Okay. So first off, let's start by initializing chai here. And what we also should do is we should also take chai HTTP. This is a different package. And now what we need to do is we need to say chai.use chai HTTP. So it will just add chai HTTP to chai. Okay, then next thing we need to do, what I like to do is I like to create a testing object. So in our case, this will be a testing to-do. So actually our to-do, the only attribute that we need there is we need a testing to-do text. So text is actually the only attribute that we need. And now we can start writing the tests. So Mocha gave us access to something called describe, and then the describe function takes like a title for a set of tests. So let's just say testing app, and this will take all of our tests, and then it takes a function. So now inside the function, we could just write tests or like test cases, but not this, by using it function. Or we can make separate sections of our tests by using another describe. So let's just do it, and let's say that we first want to test the get endpoint. So we want to first, what we want to do, and maybe let's put it here on the right hand side what we are testing. What we want to do is we want to test the following endpoint, right? So let's go in here, and it takes another function here. So let's use the arrow functions, and here we say it, and inside it we will once again place here like a title of the test case, and we'll test HTML with a correct status, response status. And here we'll just, what this test case will do is it will just make a call to this app here, and then it will we'll check what's the response status. So here we of course could check the contents of the HTML that we get back. However, that would be a little bit more complex, and I think for now it's sufficient if we just check if the call was successful and if we get a status to 100. So now it also takes another function, and here we'll define our test case. However, what we need to do now is we need to say chai.request, and this is how we make a request with chai. So chai will be very nice because it will automatically also start our application, and it will make a request to the started instance of our application. And in order for it to be able to do that, we need to pass in an app here. So of course, if we pass in an app, we need to get this app from somewhere, and therefore let's get app from our app file. So here we'll require, and we have to now to get to the app folder, we need to get out of the test folder, then we need to get inside of the app folder and to the app file. And we need to make one more change here. We need to say that this module should export the app variable. Okay, that's good. Now we have the app here, and let's see. So then you specify a method by which you want to make the request, and then, so now we are chaining basically the methods. So now you specify what you want to happen at the end of the request, so the result sort of. So this takes a function also, which takes an error and then a response. And I just put an underscore before the error because we'll not actually do anything with this error. And therefore, now I'll not get a warning from Visual Studio Code that I have declared this variable, but I'm not using it, right? So if you have to put this argument here because the first argument which is passed to this function is an error, and only the second one is the response, and we care about the response but not about the error, you can always pass an underscore here. And what we want now is we want to expect, and you can see that Visual Studio Code helped us a little bit, and it has imported expect from Chai. We want to expect our response, and now it's like speaking English, to have status 200. And that's cool. Let's now do one more thing. We need to here, if we go to package.json, here we have a test script. Let's just change this to Mocha, and let's save it. Let's now try to perhaps run our tests. So to run our tests, we need to say npm run test, and it will run the test script from our package.json. And let's see what's not right here. I think we have a typo somewhere. Require. Okay, let's save. And let's try to run it again. Okay, so this worked. Here we can see that the test that we have indeed has passed. However, there's one thing we should be aware of, and this is basically asynchronous code, or not maybe asynchronous in this case, but the fact that this request has to really finish before we can expect a response object to have any kind of status. Otherwise, if we just pass here some random value and let's stop it, let's try to run it again. If you just take a look here, right, you can also see it passing, and that's not possible that it's true. Even though here afterwards, and we can only see it afterwards, that we have a problem. And there's an easy solution to it. Here, you need to pass something called done, or the first argument that is passed to this callback function here is something you can set here, and this will make it execute this check only after the response has been finished. Therefore, if we run it once again now we can see that the test is passing, and you can see even the time it took us. So by default, Mocha tells us how long it took if it takes above a certain time. And here we can see now that the test has passed without any problems, and if we set it to some random value, try to run it again, now we can see that we actually get an error, and it shows us what was the expected value, or this is the expected value, and what was the actual value. Okay, let's stop it. Let's change it to a real one once again, and let's continue with our tests. So we have tested for now that we correctly get an HTML file back, or the response that we get has the correct status. Okay, so let's move on. What we still have, or what's the other functionality that we have, is the post endpoint here. And this post endpoint creates a to-do. So let's say describe, let's create another section. Let's say test post endpoint. And let's here, once again, pass a function. Let's use the arrows function. And here, what we want to do is we want to once again call it. Let's just say correct redirection on to the creation. And I say correct redirection because if you take a look here in the post method, if everything goes right here, it will redirect us to our home route. Therefore, we will be checking here for the redirection. So here, it will be the same thing. So we'll pass in done here, or we'll use the done argument, and it basically goes the same way. So we make a chai request, and then here we say post. So this is the method that we want to use. And then we say type. And here, by the type, what we mean is how the data will be attached to the request. So it either can be a form, and this is what we'll use, or it could be application.json or it could be JSON also, right? And so what we want to do is we want to send some kind of body here, and the body we want to send is we want to send precisely our testing to do. So this is what we want to send. And then what we want to actually do is we want to set the redirects to 0, because if we don't do that, we will be checking the response code of the redirected request. And this way, if we set the redirects to 0, we'll be checking the response code of the first request, not of the redirected one. Okay, so this is it. Let's now create the end here the same way we did last time. So an error and the response, and then an arrow, and then the body here, and we expect the response.redirect to equal true. So the response object will have a redirect attribute that will be equal to true if the response is redirected. Okay, and let's pass a done here. Let's run the tests. And we can see 2 tests passing. Let's see if this test works. Let's pass a false here. And we can see that, yes, indeed, now we have a failed test. Okay, let's set it back to true. Okay, so we have tested the post. And for now, we have not really tested if we really created the to-do. We have just tested if we have the correct response and we get no errors. So far, this has been the case. However, we will test the actual creating the actual to-do in a second. But what we have now is we have the put endpoint. Okay, so for now, let's also create here another section, another describe section. Let's actually, maybe what will be smarter if we just copy paste it. So add some space here, and we'll say test put endpoint onto the update. And now we want to also make a post, and we actually want to make a post request, not a put request, because we want to also test the method override there. So if you remember, now we need to post, and here let's maybe make a small change. We want to post on the testing to-do ID, and the problem that we currently do have is that we don't know the testing to-do ID, because the testing to-do ID is being created on the post itself. So we don't know it here because it's being created while we do the insert to the database, precisely here by the UUID4. So we need to get it. So we need to first make a query to the database to check the ID of the created testing to-do to be able to use it in a tests later on. So the way we can do it is actually, I will create a section right here, which will be an overarching section over the testing the put, testing post, and then testing the delete. So let's just maybe call this section testing to do modifications. And here the same thing, let's create a function. And now inside of this function, we will have the 2 functions. But what's more important than these 2 functions is that we'll also have something called a before hook. So we'll say before, no, before unload even, but just before. And this function will be run once before all the tests in this section. So it will be run once at the start of this section. You also have after, before each, and after each if you wanted to use that but I think Chai in general has a very nice, Chai and Mocha, they in general have a very nice documentation. You can easily look up with a tons of examples how you can do it. So here what we want to do is we want to look up our testing, or rather the ID of our to-do, of our testing to-do when it was added to the database. What we need to do, in order to be able to do that, we need to look up the ID in the database. And so what we need is, I already created this asynchronous function here because we will be awaiting a response from our database. But what we need is, we need our client. So here we have the client, this particular one, that connects to the database, and we actually need it there. So here, this module will export not only an app for us, but also the client. So we just now come in here, and we here say not only app, but also we take the client. And now what we can do here very simply is we can say const response and then await client.query. And here we can write our query. So we want to select ID from to-dos, where, and then text, because here we know that basically the column we'll be looking up with is the text column, where text equals $1. And this is in the double quotation mark because I think a text is a data type in Postgres, so it could read it as a data type and not as a name of the column. So it's just safer to have it in double quotes. And the $1 and the $1 means that we need to pass something here, and this will be testing to-do.todo. So we want to pass precisely this piece of text here, and we will be looking up using this piece of text. So now we need to assign it to a variable, and I think it makes sense to initiate like a global variable for this describe block. We'll just initialize it testing to-do ID, and here let's assign it. So testing to-do ID equals response, and then if you remember rows, the first element of the rows array, and then that ID, because we want to take the ID value. Okay, so now what we can do is here in the testing the put endpoint, we can use our testing to-do ID. Okay, that's good. So here we have a form, and that's good. And actually, we don't want to have a form because there we are not posting a form. We are just posting with a query parameter that is supposed to use the method override. So we'll then write underscore method, and it's supposed to be equal to put. Okay, and we don't want to send it because we are not sending a form anymore. Okay, and then we want to have the response redirected, so that's good. Okay, we've made some modifications to our test. Let's see if they still run. Okay, and we have 3 tests passing. That looks good. Okay, let's continue. And now, as I said, we for now only checked for the correct redirections of our requests, but not really if we created any to-dos. This we don't see, although we could just start the application and maybe see if it works or not. Maybe we can actually do that. So if I refresh it, you can see the testing to the text, testing to the text, testing to the text. And this is a small problem because currently, if I run it for the next time, I think we'll just get more testing to-dos here, and you can see that it's being probably created here and then moved up here by us also testing the put request, but so far we have no way to delete it. So our tests do not remove the test data they add, but this we will also do in a second. For now, let's make an automatic check if we actually set the to-do to done. So if the to-do actually exists, to-do was set to done. Okay, so what we need to do here is, once again, here we need to have an asynchronous function. And we need to have an asynchronous function because we will be testing a response from our database. So client.query, and once again we pass in a query here. And in the query, you want to select done from to-dos, where once again text equals $1, and the $1 means that we need to pass in the testing todo.text here. Not text, but todo. Okay, here, and then our status we will get from the response and from the rows, from the first element, and then we, instead of here, we put the ID. Here we want to take the done key, and we expect the status to equal true. And actually, before this test may fail, because if you remember, now we have many to-dos with this text, which should not be the case. We'll get to that in a second. So I will now terminate this. I will run the test once again, and actually, okay, this time it worked, but we have many to-dos, so it might as well have retrieved a to-do which is here on the left-hand side. And in that case, it would fail. And you can even see that Mocha is so nice, or try is so nice, that we can still run our application. Okay, let's close it. And let's maybe run it once again, because now we have no additional testing to-dos. And now you can see a problem, so let's see what it is. And this is because I was a little bit too quick in putting the describe section where we actually create the to-do inside here. And this needs to go up here. So we first need to create the to-do, and then we need to look up the results. Okay, let's run this once again. Okay, so let's run it once again here, and we are still getting an error. Okay. Probably would make sense if I so the file just was not saved. Please remember to save your file after you finish working. But we still have a failed test case, so let's see. So here you have to make sure that you do not have any test data in the application. And actually, if you rerun the tests, when you don't have any test data, you'll see that the test has passed. But that's actually quite valuable for us. So let's maybe make sure that this is a little bit more robust so that we do not have to manually delete it. So here in this describe section, the main one, let's make a before hook. And in the before hook, the same way that we do it actually here, we will make it, we'll have an asynchronous function that will actually, let me copy this. This will be quicker. Let's paste it here. Let's align it. And here instead of, so we'll no longer have to, we no longer need the response here, but let's here just delete. Okay, let's delete from to-dos where text equals 1. Okay, so this will just delete our testing to-do. Okay, let's move on. So we have implemented the testing of the put. So now what we have to implement is testing of the deletion, right? So let's make a new describe section. Let's actually here align it, and let's make a new describe section. Describe test delete endpoint. Okay, so here. And here we can say it. And let's maybe actually copy this, because it will be very similar. So once again, we make a post, but we make a query to use the method override with a delete. We don't want any redirects, and we want the redirect attribute to be equal to true. Okay, and we want to do the same thing basically, where we want to here add another it, and we want to test if the to-do was deleted. Okay, so now here we'll once again select it. Let's maybe select the ID this time, and we want the status equals response.rows.length, And we want the status, so the length, to be equal to 0, so that there are no rows. Okay, that's good. Let's save that and let's try to run our tests. And we can see that all our tests are passing. Let's just maybe, let's go back there. We can see that all our tests are passing, and that's very good. So this means that we have finished, and it's very, very good that now we have automatized tests for our application, and that's very, very important. In a real application, having these kinds of automatized tests enables you to build a better software quicker, and that's especially important if you want to grow and develop your application in a team where more people work on the application. Really having these tests is really, really important. I would say it's the crucial part that enables you to make good quality development. So in the next episode, I think we'll take a look and do some refactors of our application, because if we take a look at our app file now, currently it has a lot of things in it. So actually it has all the logic that our application currently has. So it has the database related code here, it has the endpoints, and here I think before we start developing the application, first we should clean up a little and do a little refactor. And this is where our automatized tests will be very important, because after we do changes to an existing piece of our code, we want to make sure that it still works. And this is where the automatized tests really, really help us. Okay, but this is to come in the next episode. So far, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.